Welcome everyone. Let us begin today with a slightly dramatic announcement. In literary theory, someone has died, and yet strangely, literature has never been more alive. Roland Barthes' essay, The Death of the Author, written in 1967, is not about the disappearance of writers or the end of creativity. It is about the death of an idea, the idea that meaning begins and ends with the person who wrote the text. Barthes challenges one of the most comfortable habits of reading, the belief that behind every text there is a single authoritative voice, whose intention we must recover. What he proposes instead is a radical shift in how we understand writing, language, and reading itself. Barthes opened the essay with a short passage from Balzac's novella Sarrazin. Rather than explaining what Balzac meant, Barthes asked a deceptively simple but deeply unsettling question. Who is speaking here? Is it the author, or is it a fictional character, or is it a cultural stereotype about women, or is it a language itself performing a role? Barthes deliberately refuses to give us a clear answer. His point is that the moment we try to locate a single speaking voice, the text escapes us. Writing, he argues, destroys the idea of a pure origin. The instant words are written, the author's identity dissolves into the text. Writing becomes a neutral space, a composite zone where multiple voices intersect. Meaning does not belong to a speaking object, it is produced within a language. In this sense, writing does not transmit intention, it erases it. From here, Barthes moves into a historical and ideological critique of authorship. He reminds us that the figure of the author is not universal or timeless. The author, as we understand it today, is a modern invention emerging alongside Enlightenment thought, individualism, rationalism, and capitalist ideas of ownership. In this framework, the author becomes the origin of meaning, the owner of the text, and the ultimately authoritative over interpretation. Traditional literary criticism reinforces this model by explaining text through biography, psychology, and personal intention. As a result, meaning becomes limited, controlled, and final. Barthes exposes this model as ideological. The author is not a natural source of meaning but a cultural mechanism designed to stabilize interpretation and preserve authority. What is fascinating is that literature itself had already begun resisting this authority long before Barthes named it. Symbolist poets like Malami insisted that language speaks, not the author. Paul Valéry rejected emotional self-expression and argued that writing is governed by linguistic systems rather than inner feelings. Marcel Proust complicated the relationship between life and writing by showing that the narrator is not the same as the biographical self. Surrealist writers went even further, experimenting with automatic writing and collective authorship, deliberately minimizing conscious intention. Across modern literature, the sacred image of author as a creative agent, creative genius, slowly collapses. Barthes does not invent this rebellion, he theorizes what literature has already been doing. At this point, Barthes brings in insights from linguistics to make one of his most radical moves. Modern linguistics shows us that language functions independently of the individual speaker. When someone says I, that word does not refer to a fixed personal identity, it is simply a grammatical position, an instance of enunciation. Meaning does not require a person behind it. From this understanding, Barthes replaces the author with a new figure, the scripter. The scripter is not a creator who exists before the text. The scripter is born simultaneously with the act of writing. There is no prior intention, no inner self waiting to be expressed. Writing exists only in the present moment of inscription. The author as a source of meaning becomes unnecessary. This leads to Barthes to one of his most influential ideas, the text as a tissue of quotations. A literary text is not an original self-contained creation. It is woven from innumerable cultural sources, myths, ideologies, earlier texts, genres, and linguistic conventions. Nothing in the text is completely new. The writer does not invent meaning but rearranging existing discourses. What we call expression is an illusion. Meaning is never fixed, it is endlessly deferred. The text remains open, unstable, and plural. It produces meaning, but it does not originate it. Once the author is removed, interpretation itself enters a crisis. Traditional criticism depends on the author to provide closure and final meaning. Without that authority, interpretation can no longer function as an act of decoding a hidden truth. Barthes insists that we should not try to pierce the text to uncover a secret meaning. Instead, we should follow its structure, its play of language, its movement. Meaning appears, disappears, and reappears in the act of reading. This refusal of fixed meaning is not intellectual chaos. For Barthes, it is a radical and revolutionary act. Writing becomes anti-theological. There is no God of meaning, no ultimate authority, no final truth. And now we reach the most important shift in the essay, the birth of the reader. If the author must die, something else must take its place. Barthes argues that the unity of a text lies not in its origin but in its destination. The reader is the space where all the textual traces are gathered. The reader is not a person defined by biography or psychology. The reader is a function of reading itself. Meaning exists only when reading happens. There is no authoritative interpretation, only multiple possibilities activated in engagement within the text. Barthes concludes with his famous declaration, the birth of the reader must be at the cost of the death of the author. In conclusion, the death of the author fundamentally reshapes how we think about literature. It challenges biographical and intentional criticism, establishes the plurality of meaning, and shifts literary authority from the writer to the reader. It becomes one of the foundational texts of post-structuralist thought. Texts do not carry meaning like a message in a bottle. They perform meaning in interaction with the readers. And readers are no longer passive recipients, they are active producers of significance. So, the next time, if someone asks what did the author really mean, you might smile and respond, the author is dead, but reading has never been more alive. Thank you.